Change the conversation. Change the conversation. Change the relationship. Change the relationship. We're strong, resilient.
Hey there. I'm Dr. Cheryl Clarke.
And I'm Dr. Gregory Clarke.
And we are here for our third episode. Number three. You excited?
I'm very excited.
I can tell. All right, so our third episode, when the old version of your life no longer fits. Does that sound like a yummy topic?
Sounds like a great topic. And before you get any further with us, we would love for you to hit that subscribe button, click that like button, make sure your notifications are on, and, make sure that you are here at this particular channel, and that's at Greg and Cheryl Clarke. And don't forget, there's an E at the end of Clarke.
At the end of Clarke. All right, so let's jump right into it. Today, if this is your very first time, buckle up because we come to bring real tools to you today. And today we're talking about a topic that is near and dear to our heart, I believe, because we're here talking about bringing some real tools about how we started a new season of our life. And now, sometimes when you start a new season of your life, the old version no longer fits you, but you did come with some tools in that old version that you've already equipped for this new season. What would you say?
Well, we all have tools in our tool chest. We all have things that we can keep in our book bag. We have things that can be digged down, way down in the purse. But at the same time, not everything that you can bring with you into your new season. Now, you may bring that bag with you. You may even bring that book bag with you. But there are certain things that you may not necessarily need, and you have to leave in the old season because then you're bringing certain old flows into a new dispensation, and that may not necessarily work.
Yeah, so sometimes, with the old version, you're thinking about, I'm a mom of 6. I am a wife of 31 years. I've been a teacher, a daycare teacher. I've been a what else I've been? I've been a lot of things. I stuck in a library. All those things come along with it. I'm a therapist now. I'm a minister now. And it's like so many of the roles have really moved into that. And then sometimes in a season, it's like you can get trapped into a role and not understand that season sometimes has called for a pause.
Well, what ends up happening is sometimes we all have the opportunity to do so is about that we end up collapsing a lot of things. We start collapsing certain roles and certain things, and that's when we ended up pulling things that we thought that we may benefit us in our new areas or our new discoveries of evolution, and not recognizing that, wait a minute, okay, certain things are still going to continue on because that is who you are. But when you recognize that there's certain parts of you that may not be beneficial for where you're going, you start to understand how to not collapse certain things, but to allow certain things to go and certain things to work.
So this is a real conversation. This is not us telling you, right? So this is why I said something about my life, because this is understanding. The conversation is about how you can build something, right? And understand that when a job ends, like Dr. Clarke job ended like some years ago, or the relationship, you move on with certain things. Like there's certain things that do happen. And then how do you now build on that to now, where are you and where are you becoming? So in this episode, you may be in your 40s, you may be in your 30s, you may be in your 50s, your 60s, and there's times in your life that you're going to see from one disposition to a next that you're going to shift. And we're, as married couples, we also shift. Even when, we're getting ready to marry someone, and you got to get prepared for the marriage, because that version of her at 30 is not going to be the same version of her at 40, right?
It's not.
Because Gregory is not the same Gregory. I am not the same Cheryl. And this is where you could begin to say that. So what would you say about yourself?
Well, what I would say about myself is that I'm recognizing that the necessary tools that I would need to move into another season, I start to gather and start to utilize some of the previous experiences. So you're not starting from just a clear slate. And that's where sometimes we end up collapsing a lot of things. And sometimes we can allow our energies or our feelings to move in a particular way and not recognize it. You do have a basis point that you're starting from.
Mm.
So as you're recognizing that you're moving into a new season, you don't necessarily have to bring all the old things. It's just like an operating system. If I told you to go use Windows 95 in 2026, you would look at me like I'm crazy.
Why?
Number one, Microsoft doesn't even support it no more. Number two, the numbers up. And so as we start to recognize how things are starting to flow, we start to see that you have to be moving in the right operating system, especially for your life.
Yeah. So if you had to identify in the season, we want you to be, when you're listening to us today, we want you to identify where in this space that you may be at and what you're still carrying, right? Maybe it could be family, some situations, and you have a difficult season in there. And sometimes we carry things from things that may have happened. We carry it into today, or we have conflict with someone and we carry it into today. You know, like Dr. Clarke and I have conflicts all the time. But how do we now not bring it into today? We have to get very clear what is happening, what's going on, so we can move through it. Because listen, we're married. That doesn't mean that we're dead. We do have conflicts, don't we?
Yes, we do. And you got to know how to flow with it. You got to know when to speak, when not to speak, when to be at peace, and when to move
right through it.
Just move through it and just be. Once you start to get a resolute space to yourself and a certain level of alignment, you start to recognize that's going to assist you in that new season. And not even that, when you start to get aligned with where you're going towards, you start to recognize some of the things that you did in the past just doesn't work. And sometimes you got to know when to let certain things go and just keep it moving.
Yeah, so this is where I would say that the version of myself in the season where you cannot limit your next. That's what I realized, that a lot of times in our season, we attempt to limit our next. And sometimes that really it calls on our faith. And, you know, that's where I think that my husband and I think Clarke and I, we kind of like have that as the center, the core, because if our belief was not strong in what this version of us, ourselves, and we don't name it as bad or good. That's the thing where we get really, really maybe like pigeon-toed in. I think that was what Dr. Clarke was saying earlier, is that sometimes we can carry those things, or well, what my mama said about me, this said about me, all this to that next version of us, which doesn't work. So we still may be carrying those things live and we don't even know it. So a lot of times when you get into these relationships or you come into the next version of you, you got to leave some of those things that doesn't work for this season. What would you say?
Well, one of the things that comes into play is that you recognize that the energy, everything is based upon energy. And it's energy that we emote, energy that we share, energy that sometimes you can even absorb from others. And you start to recognize, like, where's this energy coming from? Or where's this situation coming from? And then you see that sometimes if the energy is not aligned for where you're going, and that's why Dr. Cheryl Clarke alluded to the fact of not being bad or good. But if you see that it's not aligned for where you're going, now we're not saying that the energy is a bad thing. We're starting to say, why are you misaligned? Why are you moving in a space where you're not aligned? What is going on? Could it be a physical thing? Could it be a mental thing? Could it be something that, you know, sometimes we could have stubbed our toe and all of a sudden that changes our own energy structure. And now all of a sudden everyone's looking and saying, like, wait a minute, what's going on? So wait a minute, I didn't physically do anything to you. Did something happen? Is there something going on? And so we have to look for those areas where we can stay in alignment, because misalignment could be one of the parameters that keep you away from fulfilling what it is that you're supposed to be doing. That's why when you think about Ecclesiastes 3:1,
dropping the scripture.
And you start to recognize how, you know, everything has a time and a season for everything. And so when you start to position yourself, you don't allow yourself to be motivated.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you are looking at this area of your life, this is where you got to look at how we're going to give you four signs that the old version no longer fits. Okay, so these are the 4 signs. All right. So I think what we would probably do, Greg, maybe we'll go back and forth of some of the signs that we have, because there's 4 signs that your version no longer fits. And the first one is chronic resentment. Wow. Chronic resentment. So you keep saying yes, right? You keep saying yes. Every time yes costs you something, right? And the resentment, you keep building up resentment after resentment after resentment. And then you make people wrong every single time. So sometimes the information that you have may be built up. And sometimes you just needed to create boundaries surrounding that because this doesn't work.
And that second one is the constant performance. You continuously show up. You continue to play that role. You continue to move in that space where you no longer feel present within it. And so when you start to see that people are applauding that version of you that may not necessarily work, you have to start to recognize, are you stuck in constant performance?
Yeah, this is where I think that it's an opportunity for us to pause here, because the performance, I believe that's a lot of times where I could have been in performing something that I had left that area of my life, because sometimes you could just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. And I had to learn that did not work for my body anymore. And that does not make anything wrong with it, but it's just that the awareness that you were in performance mode. And a lot of times you don't know that you're in performance. And when I figured out, when I went to go speak to someone and had a conversation with them, I realized that performance no longer worked for this day, because all I was doing was just tiring myself out. And there was nobody applauding. Everybody, it was left with me doing it. Now this is the thing where had a conversation about where I used to have parties all the time. And I said, okay, we used to have
She would be the party coordinator and setting everything up.
Yeah.
And then you start to recognize the energy that you're expressing or expounding. Now you have to understand, is that either that energy is being reciprocated, or what is the payoff? Because there's always a purpose in energy. If you don't have purpose for your energy, then it becomes idle work. And that idle work can manifest itself into your next season, because then it's not that your heart is not good. It's not that you're not maybe moving from a space where you are giving of yourself, but are you giving too much? Are you giving in a space where there's no level of saying ebb and flow, yin and yang? And if there's no yin and yang, you can be giving and giving and giving, and then at the end of the day, be an expectation of why I'm not receiving something, but it's your expectation. So recognize how it is that you're moving, especially when you're performing.
Yeah, because this is important for you in order for you to get that. So the next one is shrinking. So many times we can shrink ourselves in a space, and you may have an idea. You may have something that you know that you are prepared for, but you shrink it. And you don't be able to move in that season. And then you miss the window, because it could have been a time for you to be able to move in that window. So then you shrink yourself, and then now you're not able to move in that. I said, what would you say to that?
Well, shrinking also can look like sometimes a lack of confidence. And this is why I would preface with that. Because when you start to shrink yourself, especially when you're prepared, especially when you are powerfully expressing something, and especially in a space when you've done the work. If you've done the work in something and you end up shrinking, what is it that you're doing to those individuals around you, or who could be around in that particular space and place that can be assisting you in that shrinking? Sometimes we can have some of the greatest ideas, some of the greatest actions, the greatest possibilities, and then all of a sudden we minimize it. It's not even the people around us minimize it. We end up minimizing it. And then we get disturbed by the fact that not only they're not seeing who we are, we're not seeing who we are. And until you really see who you are, then you will continue to move in that space of shrinking. But as long as that you keep applying yourself and speaking life into yourself and recognizing who it is that you're supposed to be and how it is that you already have gathered the necessary tools, because every day is a learning process. Just because you know something, we're both doctors, but that doesn't mean that every day you cannot learn something. So as you continue to allow yourself to be applicable, even you have your foundation and your basis point, but it's okay to move in that space where I'm going to learn something today that's going to add to my skill level, and I don't have to shrink to do that.
Yeah. And the fourth one?
And the fourth one is recurring imagination. Sometimes, we can be in that space where it's like, it's almost like analysis paralysis. I would call that recurring imagination like analysis paralysis. You can be in a space where you have so many great ideas or so many opportunities to implement an idea, then you really don't do it. So it's like you keep analyzing and you keep nitpicking around and you keep saying, wait, no, sometimes it's better just to say, you know what?
Let's go at it.
Just go at it and allow yourself to be in the space of the imagination. And with your imagination is going to work with you. Now, if you keep bottling that imagination and keep putting it in a space where it's like, as we were saying earlier about shrinking, now all of a sudden we're wondering why, wait a minute, you have a lot, your ability to craft something is fine.
Did you ever shrunk? Yeah, you ever shrunk yourself?
I would say there have been times that I've allowed myself to be minimized to be in a certain space, and I can recognize that, and that has happened. There may have been times around certain individuals and certain things like that, or sometimes you start to recognize the field that you're in. And it's like, wait a minute, if I start moving in my alpha in this respective space, it may cause that conflict.
So give them an idea of what was it, because you have a plethora of times that's happened and you have done that, so they can actually know, because they that audience is knowing, getting to know us, right? So what was some of the times that you feel like you have really shrunk yourself in that space?
I would say definitely when I was a teacher, because there were times where
and then you were an elementary school teacher,
and there were times where I started to recognize that when certain things didn't align, certain things did not align, and there were certain things that I had the ability to speak up about, and I chose not to. And then at the same time, I started to notice that I was starting to shrink in that respective space because of the fact of certain things that weren't aligned with me from just a fundamental standpoint. And so that became that tug and pull, or that tug of war that happens sometimes in us individually. And then after a while, I had to make a decision. It's like, wait a minute, what is going to actually win? Am I going to let them win, or I'm going to recognize how I can position myself to win, and at the same time make sure that the children win? And so, those areas when I was definitely a teacher were times that I may have to minimize myself. And I know, especially as a Black male teacher, I know there's plenty of other Black male teachers out there who've experienced that. And so we recognize that, we may have had to play the role to shrink, but then we still recognize our greatness as we continue to manifest.
That's amazing that you say that, because in the space, we don't know that we're shrinking, and these stories will be able, so many other people probably can say, because they don't know that your kindergarten copy was an elementary school teacher, early childhood at that, and understanding so many of us are needed there. But sometimes we shrink because we don't know that this is an opportunity for us to be move into the system. So now we're in the school system doing things that to show how that the teachers can be able to still be able to help the children be able to move and to be able not to minimize themselves. So I thought that was a good one. That was a good one. So that, when we're moving into this and asking some of the difficult questions that we're moving through in this season of our lives, it's important for us to understand that this is where the part is that now the grief sometimes that come along with that, the grief of the parts of us that we may have outgrown. So what do I mean by that? Because when life happens, sometimes we outgrow that person, and then there's a grieving period over that. Now, as a clinician, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about why I say that. Because in the very beginning of that, when you lose something, it doesn't have to be necessarily a person, but think about when you lose something. You have to grieve it if you're never ever going to see it again, right? And at some point, you got to get to the acceptance of this is my new journey, right? If you continue to stay in that grief of you bargaining with God, you're saying, and then you become depressed, and then you start doing other things, and then you get angry, all the things, you keep going back and forth until you get to acceptance. That is the space where you want to be, accepting what happened, accepting that I lost the job, accepting that I lost a relationship, accepting that I lost all those things that happened, right? That's the part where we got to get to. But there's a journey, just like with our book, The Power of the 4 A's. It's our journey of losing the marriage in the very beginning. So in the very, was 15 years, and how many years when we did that divorce? What year was that?
That was 2016, 17.
Yeah, so what year was that in?
No, that was 21st year.
Yeah, so 20-something years that we was going to call it quits. Like, that version of us, we buried. that version of us,
when you think about the grief,
yeah,
and when you think of the grief, the reason why things are being grieved, because usually grief also has some level of pain attached
yeah,
to it. And
true.
so regardless if you're going into a season, say like as Dr. Cheryl keeps alluding to, we're in a season now where we're more stepping more into our entrepreneurial vein. We're more stepping into those areas where we're starting to become much more into the marketplace than we were before. And there's a grief period because now there are people who may grieve the fact that, wait a minute, we were used to them in this dispensation. But now as we start to move into another dispensation and another avenues and other areas of growth, we start to recognize that you still have that process of grief, but you can't allow grief to keep you sabotaged or to keep you stuck. And you have to allow yourself to stand on that grief, grow from that grief, experience it. Don't just minimize it, experience it, and then see it for what it is, because there's actually stuff that you can grow from that grief so that you can propel yourself to the next level.
Yeah. So going back to the marriage, when we had that experience with our marriage, going through a grief system or going through the grief process, we actually in 2016 Greg decided to move out. We decided that he would get his own place. And I stayed in the family house, and his it was a block away. You want to say a block away? I said 4 blocks away. He said it's a block away because you don't have to cross the street. Just to making it like that. So this is where you get to understand. This is what it is. It's tomato. That's what it is. But anywho, we separated, and we're parents of 6. We know we still have to be responsible for the children. We had bills together. We had things. We wasn't doing. We wasn't lifing.
I needed to get out of the home.
Yeah, and I needed him to get out of the home. So it was like we just needed to get away from each other, because at that point we were toxic to each other, and we were toxic to the children. It was just leaning down to the children. So at that moment, we needed to grieve the version of ourselves. So we got support. We went to a therapist, and we got some things straight about communication, how he saw me, how I saw him, and how we could begin to move in a space. And that's how the Power of the 4 A's got created, because we noticed that we had to accept ourselves in that version of us, because I got married when I was 18. So we're teenagers. I got married at 18, right? 19?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, this felt like it was 18. Well, we were together for a long time. I was together since we was 14, 15 years old. So, we've been together a very long time. So we may have been married for 31, but we've been together for how long?
It's over 36 years.
Yeah.
Going on 37.
So when you're looking at that, you got to look at how many versions of me there was, how many versions of Greg there was. And in that 21st year, there was a piece of us that we needed to grieve.
In other words, we have been through very different versions of each other. And that's why when we started to recognize when that break had to happen, which spawned the book, it was about recognizing that there had to be a death. There had to be a level of death. The death of that respective relationship and how it was going, it had to die.
Yeah.
And sometimes we look at things, even in a committed relationship, oh, this thing's just going to keep going, and that's the way it's supposed to be. No, after a while, certain things, as Cheryl keeps alluding to, she was 19 when she got married, and now as she in her 50s, she has to I have to recognize that the same person that was at 19 is not the person that's in her 50s. And so the same way that you have to look at it, even in your respective relationship. Understand that you will go through different versions of each other. It doesn't mean that you've changed and you became bougie and stuff. No, you evolve, you grow, you start to have much more amicable spaces where you're going to articulate yourself, and you know exactly what you desire, and not move in the spaces of want. And then when that occurs, you start to see that you're actually more powerfully expressed. And that's probably why most individuals, when they start getting in their 50s, start recognizing, if I knew some of the stuff in my 50s, when I was in my 20s, I'd be even scarier. Because now when you get to, now that you have the seasoning, now that you've been through those versions, now that you're continuing to evolve and even still becoming strengthened, you're starting to understand that those old versions were just preparing you for where you're going to.
And then the key that we found out, you have to be grateful about those seasons. Because if you keep regurgitating, saying, oh my goodness, that happened to me. Oh my goodness. This is the thing that will happen. If you walk into a grateful heart, we had to be thankful for those years. We had to be thankful for the times that we had the ups and downs, because it made us who we are. So if you're in this space and you're hearing us today, if you're in a relationship that has ended, if you're in a job that has ended, if there's the things that are starting or those things, and that is where you're stuck at, you don't have to be stuck there.
No.
You can begin to just embrace it and just stop where you are. Just do me a favor and say, thank you. Thank you, God.
Have
Thank
the
you,
gratitude.
universe.
Just have the gratitude. Because see, a gratitude will start to not change the energy, but what it's going to do is going to allow you to recognize the energy around you. And even the things that you may not have liked, you'd be surprised how many doors the universe may have blocked that has really saved you. You was wishing, you was desiring, I got to get through that door. It's like, no, there's a reason that you experience everything. And if you're still here, that means you recognize that. Be grateful for it all, because regardless of the up and downs, the highs or lows, the lefts or the rights, but you're still here. And if you're still here, you have something to be grateful for.
You know, there's so many times that we apply for something and you say, oh, we should have got that. It wasn't your season. It wasn't yours. So this is where you can now come into a space of immediately understanding how faith, timing, and permission goes hand in hand. So in the space of understanding, and Dr. Clarke quoted Ecclesiastes earlier in his statement, there's always a time and a season for everything. And when you show up in the season, sometimes it may look confusing. Sometimes it may be uncomfortable. But when you think about it, we have God in the center of what we do, because that's our belief. We believe that if we begin to trust God and trust his plan for our lives, then we can begin to move in that. So we kind of understand that we're required in this space to, I think I'm required to give honor to God, because I believe I would not be here if it wasn't for God in my life, delving me, understanding, oh, Cheryl, turn left, oh, turn right. You can call it your intuition, you can call it your gut feeling, whatever you want to call it. And there's times in my life that I know something higher has saved me. And if I'm in rooms now, I thank God for those rooms. I thank God that I can be able to be there with my spouse. And I'm loving the fact that I'm able to be on this platform with him. And you know, just so I want to say this, as many moons ago, we tried this. It didn't work. We were arguing. We couldn't do it.
Well, I would say this, those different dispensations allowed us to be prepared for this moment. So
I agree.
Instead, I'll be a little different than my wife. Instead of trying, all those previous attempts were areas that allowed us to become much more, refined. And now that we become much more comfortable in our respective skins, it's not just about, her way or my way. It's about recognizing that once you get comfortable within yourself, even disagreements, there's even different ways that because it's not worth the energy. It's not worth, because remember, it's not good energy, it's not bad energy. Why would I give that energy? And when you start to recognize, when you walk in your faith and move in proper timing and stay in that permission space and be permissible, you're starting to allow all of those things that you can develop to flow for you. Instead of saying, why didn't this happen? Or why did and that happened back? And it's okay, those are great. No, we can be focused upon that and not focus upon that. Those great attempts just prepared us for this day.
So we're gonna leave you with 3 R's. 3 R's. The first R is release. Release. Release anything that no longer serves you. Release anything that you don't have the capability for. Like I was the party planner. Release it. Release anything that causes you any pain. Just release. You don't need to carry it into that.
And ultimately, the second one, you have to know how to retain. You have to know how to be in a space where you have earned what you have learned.
Come on.
You have you positioned yourself effectively. And also by retaining that, you're starting to understand you're not starting from zero. Too many times we go through life, even when we start getting into these different, excuse me, age numbers, like as if you're starting from zero. No, you're not. You're coming with a plethora of experience
True.
that you have retained, that you've been exposed to, and you put the actionable steps within. Utilize all that to continue to even plot yourself forward. Because if you use that as a retaining posture, you start to recognize you're not losing anything.
Not anything. And the last one is reimagine. I love this one because it requires you to you don't have to repeat that old version. You can imagine what life will look like for you. Use your imagination in this season. Use the version. Think out the box of what you can look like. Spend time with yourself. And my husband catches me all the time in the room. I'm just they keep scaring me the other day. I'm always imagining my world and creating my world and utilizing. He scared the heck out of me the other day as I was in my own world, just creating and creating. And this is where we want to give you reimagine. Create a platform like this. You think you got something to say? Go ahead and say it. Why not? You can say it. Maybe someone will listen to you. You never know. And so the last thing that we're going to tell you to do is write one sentence. There's one sentence for each word. And Dr. Clarke?
I release, and you can add whatever word. And I retain.
Whatever word.
And I am beginning to reimagine.
Whatever word. Right? So this is what we want to leave you with today. So I want you to begin to start walking in that. I want you to begin to move in that. I want you to say, this is an opportunity for me to then say, I have it. I know. I'm retaining it. I release it. I retain it. I'm reimagining it.
And I desire for you to move in that space where you start to recognize, as it says in Psalms 23, we're going to remove the want out of our respective areas. We're going to allow ourselves to retain those powerful possibilities that we can move through. And as we continue to even flow from retain to reimagine, we're starting to understand that everything that we put ourselves, because God put those desires within us. And so allow yourself to get into the space to qualify those desires and utilize them and work through them appropriately.
Yeah, so remain grateful. And as you do that through this time that the old version is now disappearing and the new version is emerging, go forth in this and make sure that you come and visit us next time as we this on the episode of Real Talk, Real Tools, and Real Life.
Real people. Real people. Don't forget the people now. We'll see you next time.
Peace and blessings.
Change the conversation. Change the relationship. Change the relationship. We're strong, resilient, and real.